Hello and welcome to the 40th episode of How Are You Holding Up? A mental health podcast by the depressed, for the depressed. I'm Lindsey.
I'm Chris.
And we have a special guest today, and that is New.
Hi.
The first question I think we're going to skip, unless you guys want to do a quick little...
I mean, we could.
Okay. New, how are you holding up?
I'm stable. I'm pretty stable.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean,
How about you, Chris?
I'm okay. I'm gonna go with I'm okay. After last week, I'm definitely in a better place.
That's good.
I got to see my therapist, so that was nice. And I've got a full busy week, and I'm going to cook a duck after we are done recording this. That's gonna be fun.
Oh, good.
Yay!
Yay.
Small things.
I get to see my therapist tomorrow.
Ah.
So that's good.
Yay!
And I'm trying to make moves into doing something I'm passionate about work-wise, so fingers crossed. And a little hope in your life always puts you in a better headspace, even if it's dashed eventually.
Couldn't agree with that more.
Absolutely.
So this week, the reason why we are going to be joined by our guest New is we are going to be talking about illness and depression, specifically chronic illness.
Yes, and as always, we want to mention we are not professionals. These are opinions and just a conversation.
Yep, it's completely experiential and biographical if we want to be specific about it. So starting off, New,
Yes.
what's your story?
Who are you?
Where do I start?
Well, the TLDR version.
Most people with chronic illness have signs early on, like in childhood. Mm-hmm. And so when I think back, even in like first grade, I was always in pain. My back hurt, my stomach hurt, my throat, my tonsils were swollen. Something was always wrong. And recently I found my report cards from elementary school, and every one of them said that I was always at the nurse's office. And it was a weird moment of like, I had proof that I was sick and I wasn't comfortable as a kid. But it made me sad to realize, because it's like no one believed me even back then, because little kids, you don't really think of them as being sickly.
And a lot of people just assume that you're trying to get out of class, and it was
Yep.
probably this really negative thing
Mm-hmm.
on top of you being sick.
Like, don't, my dad would say, hey, don't stop telling the teachers that you have bronchitis. They're going to think you want attention. And, I'd have a stomach ache and go home, and a parent would be like, oh, well, you seem fine now, so you're just faking it.
Right.
You wanted to get out of class. And it's like, I did want to get out of class because I was being bullied, but I also didn't feel well. So that just makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so then by adulthood, it just became debilitating and disabling by the time I was 23.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. I guess the first diagnosis that I got that was like official was the ulcerative colitis.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my first colonoscopy when I was 15, and they were just like, yeah, you're full of ulcers. Here's acid reflux medication. Don't eat spicy food.
Oh my gosh.
And then, by the time I was 21, I was just throwing up constantly, bleeding from my colon every day, losing weight, and, like 100 bowel movements a day, just living on the toilet.
So you were a really happy person.
Yeah, I felt great. And I was working in skincare, so,
Oh no.
I was like shitting my pants in between facials.
Yeah.
But,
one of the things I admire about you most is that you seem to have picked up a lot of hobbies, and you know so much about so many different things that you're passionate about. You put up content, you've been working, you do a lot of different jobs, and I thought that was really interesting, because so many people who are that sick and that nobody believes them for that long, like you kind of become a shut-in.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm such a different person now than I was when I first got sick to the point where it was debilitating. Because back then I was still, I was 23. I was 23 when I had the ulcerative colitis diagnosis when I was 21. When I was 23, it was the narcolepsy. Finally, after 10 years of hallucinating, not sleeping, seeing demons in my room, sleepwalking, all kinds of weird shit since I was a kid. And finally the doctor was like, oh, you've been hallucinating? Oh, you might be narcoleptic. Duh. And so
Nobody tested you for narcolepsy.
No, they were just like, you're a tired teenager, you need to go to bed earlier.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
How we believe our children and our teenagers.
Yeah. Well, I thought I was cursed when I was like 15. I literally thought, I didn't know who to tell, because I tried telling people and they just thought you had a nightmare.
Attention, or
you're fucking crazy. So I was keeping it to myself and having horrible hallucinations. And now that I have dealt with narcolepsy for so long, the hallucinations aren't scary anymore.
And you don't have them as much, right? Because you're taken care of.
Yeah, like cannabis has taken it from one sleep paralysis episode a day for like 4 hours to once every few months.
Yeah.
Crazy difference.
Amazingly different, yeah.
And that's the whole reason I started cannabis in the first place. But summertime, I still get flare-ups. The heat triggers narcolepsy.
Well, I want to really go into it more, but I think first we're going to touch on one of the inspirations for this was we got an email from one of our listeners.
Yes, and this was a listener who had been going through... It's funny, I've known New now for... Oh my god, how long have we known each other? Like, I
want to say over 10 years.
At least since high school, so yeah. So I'd say about closer to 13 years or so. So as soon as I read this email, I was immediately just like, oh, I know exactly who we could talk to about this. And it was from Francis. Hello, this is just a friendly message from a relatively new listener, but longtime depression sufferer. I'm so happy to have found your podcast, especially at this particular point in my life. It's nice to hear two normal people talk openly about their own struggles with depression and the different aspects that are associated with the disease, but are otherwise often overlooked.
Thank you.
Thank you. That being said, would the two of you consider doing an episode on depression and illness, sickness? I only ask because for the past year, I have been struggling with an illness that none of the multiple doctors I have gone to seem to be able to pinpoint exactly what it is. This ongoing illness, along with my already present depression, seemed to magnify the symptoms I was experiencing. It seemed like the illness and the depression were a tag team, and the finish line was making me feel as absolutely shitty as possible. While I am feeling better than I had been, I can't help but wonder if my symptoms would have been less severe if I had gotten my depression reevaluated, or if I had gone to a good caring doctor first, would the depression not have been so bad? So, all that...
Yeah. So that, inspired us because we were like, well, we don't want to talk about something that we don't know and we haven't lived through, because living with depression on its own is so hard and so debilitating, let alone having all of these symptoms, physical issues, completely taking you away from your life. So we wanted to hear it from somebody who's dealt with it, which is new. Yay. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to finally be here. So calling it a tag team is really great because a lot of illnesses do come with depression. Like narcolepsy, one of the comorbid things is depression, fibromyalgia, depression, ulcerative colitis, depression. And it's maybe part of it is the suffering that comes with it, but also because those illnesses like fibromyalgia and narcolepsy are neurological, so they mess with your brain function to begin with. And then ulcerative colitis messes with your gut, which messes with your probiotics and your ability to make serotonin in your gut. So it's all a system that can get thrown off balance. And when you already have depression, it makes it even harder. And when your illnesses are taking you away from doing things that make you happy or working or following your dreams, or when people don't believe you, your family says you're faking, you feel like shit even more.
So cut off.
Yeah, it's very, very isolating.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about chronic illness so much, because I was so isolated in the beginning of it, even though I had a family who I would try to tell, what I was going through, and they couldn't understand it. They couldn't be there for me. And I didn't have a support system for a long time. And I just felt like I even had, I lost friends. They would tell me, you talk about your illnesses too much. All you talk about is being in pain. But it's literally all I could think about because of the amount of pain I was in.
It took over your life.
It took over everything. I was throwing up constantly. I was just my pupils were constantly huge because I was stuck in this overstimulated thing because of being in pain. Mm-hmm. So I would throw up. The first time it happened really bad, I threw up for 6 days straight. That's like a flare-up that triggered it. Mm-hmm. I went to the ER finally. After 6 days, I lost 12 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And the nurse in the ER was mad at me. She was like, you should have been here after 3 days. If you had gone a couple more days, you could have collapsed. And I felt the reason I waited so long
because
to go to
you
the ER,
didn't want to,
and I felt like a burden. I felt like I was upsetting my dad because he didn't know. It's not my dad's fault that he didn't know. It's like, how can you accept that your child is sick? So my dad, instead of, he couldn't be there for me because he couldn't understand it, and he was angry that he couldn't fix it. Because my dad's the kind of person who's like, if something's wrong, if with my computer or in my room or something, he's like, I'm here, I'll fix it. Right. He's like a handyman, and he loves showing his love that way. Right. But he couldn't fix me being sick. Yeah. So
walk us through because I think a lot of people think of narcolepsy as just like, oh, you just fall asleep a lot.
That's a huge stereotype. There are people, and I do have followers with narcolepsy who have that specific type. So narcolepsy is primarily, it's a lack of a protein called hypocretin, something like that, in your brain, and that allows you to fall asleep and get the deep, restorative sleep. That's when we regenerate.
The REM
Which
sleep.
We absolutely need to have. And if you're a new mother or you're somebody who has a hard time falling asleep because of anxiety, depression, you know how bad it can be if you don't sleep well after a couple days.
Yeah, it when my narcolepsy first flared up to the point where I was like, something is wrong, it was actually my cat passed away after a 2-year battle with cancer. That the emotion of that, the trauma of that, triggered my narcolepsy to be worse than it had ever been in my childhood, in like my teenage years. So I had, the hallucinations and being tired all day and stuff, but it got so bad that I couldn't fall asleep for more than 10 minutes at a time for like 8 months.
Oh my gosh.
I felt like I was losing my goddamn mind, and I was.
Well, yeah, you lose your mind.
Yeah, I would go to the doctor. I would go to the neurologist. We got the sleep study done. We did the wires. I didn't fall asleep one time the whole sleep study because I was so severe. So one thing that's hard for people to understand about narcolepsy is the reason that we're so tired is because we can't sleep.
Yeah.
So the narcoleptics that have sleep attacks, they're very tired. But there are also narcoleptics who have cataplexy, and that's the kind, if they laugh too hard, they'll literally collapse on the floor. And it's like the goats, the fainting goats. It's cataplexy. And I thankfully don't have that. I have followers who do, and they can't drive anymore because something spooks them.
No, they just can't. Yeah, they knock out. So for you, well, that's awful. Yeah. For you, how is it showing, like, as you were growing up and then as you became an adult? Like, what was just the narcolepsy? Like, what would that look like?
When I was little, I had a lot of sleepwalking. I would wake up in random rooms in the house, and I was terrified all the time. I think I was having like night terrors or something. I always felt scary presence in the room.
So you just didn't know?
I didn't. Yeah, and I couldn't sleep because I was scared. And I just weird sensations and weird sounds, and that exploding head syndrome.
Yeah,
I would get that a lot. It was like and stuff like that. Little weird things that didn't really make sense. But then I would get to school and, like, even as a little kid, like, not be able to focus and stay awake in class because I was so tired. And it was in middle school when the hallucinations started.
Oh my gosh, how horrifying. And that would happen anywhere?
That would happen specifically if I tried to, like, sleep. So, like, I would get home from school. I'd be tired from trying to stay awake all day. And I can't do my homework right now. I need a nap. I would go take a nap. And, like, just a few minutes after, like, putting my head down on the pillow, it's like, it's sleep paralysis. So your body paralyzes you when you're dreaming, so you're not, like, punching stuff in your sleep, which I do anyway. I punched my grandma in my sleep once. That's why she made me sleep in another room after that for my summer grandma and grandpa visits. I punched her in the face. Anyway, so sleep paralysis, your body paralyzes you because it's like, oh, it's sleep time, it's time to dream.
Right.
But you're still awake. And so you start dreaming while you're awake. You start hallucinating. Your brain starts spitting out images and like taking you, astral projecting you and
So at the time, did you feel like this was paranormal experiences that you were having?
Yeah, and it doesn't help that my mom and my, like, aunts and stuff have all seen ghosts, and they've always told me, you have the gift. And I was like, I don't want it. I'm scared. I don't like shit like that.
Yeah.
Oof. And so and this would happen usually during the day. It's very rare for me to have sleep paralysis hallucinations at nighttime unless I'm really stressed out or my period's coming or I haven't slept well, then I'll get it at night. But it's always during the day, is the heat will trigger it too. So if it's an afternoon nap and the sun is coming through my window, I will almost always have sleep paralysis. But, like, it can be anything from demons to an alien ballerina to one of them. The best one that I had, it was so funny. It was just like Tom Hiddleston with his long Loki hair, like standing in my kitchen pointing at me. That was the whole hallucination. For like an hour.
God.
He didn't say anything. And at some point, like, you realize,
and
okay,
you can't move.
Can't move.
So you're just laying there, and your eyes are open, and you're seeing all of this.
Like, my eyes are open, they're rolling usually, because I'm trying to move, because I can usually, like, I can try to get out of it and, like, move my wrist. And so sometimes I'll go, foot, and I'll get myself up, but your muscles are
locked.
so weak, I'll fall over and fall right back into the hallucination.
Ugh, it's nuts.
It's like you're being dragged down into hell, and that's what I thought was happening to me when I was a kid. I was like, okay, because I was seeing monsters and demons, and now that I'm older, I still see monsters, but they're not scary. I'm just like, because I know what's happening.
It's your brain.
Yeah, and that's why the whole like incubus and succubus myths come from sleep paralysis.
That makes a lot of sense.
Really interesting.
That demon would sit on your chest and hold you down and make you hallucinate and have sex with you and that.
Yeah. Dreams.
Yeah.
But that was just your narcolepsy.
Yeah, just the narcolepsy.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, I want to talk about like how you've kind of started coping and fixing it. So, I'm totally talking. What about you?
No. I mean, I was going to say, because my mom also has fibromyalgia, and that has just been a constant. But she was diagnosed with it like way later in life, in her 40s.
What is fibromyalgia?
Okay, so fibromyalgia is kind of mysterious. It's generally known, like, the name fibromyalgia means like muscle pain, basically, but it's so much more than that. It's a fibromyalgia syndrome. It's pain, daily pain all the time, but also like fatigue. So a lot of doctors have attributed it to like our cells don't make enough ATP for our muscles. That's the energy, because our muscles are like batteries. Mm-hmm. They store all the energy, right? And so we don't make enough, and then we don't have energy to do things. So like, for example, like during a bad fibromyalgia flare-up, if I go to the grocery store for 30 minutes by myself, it sometimes can take me 2 weeks to recover from that. 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. It sets me on a flare-up in a cycle, and that's when I can start throwing up. That's when I'm really bad. I'm a lot better now. I haven't had an episode like that in a long time.
There's nothing to fix it. This is something lifelong.
Yeah, no cure. It's because it's so mysterious. It's like, it's neurological, so it's in the nervous system, and it affects absolutely everything. It affects your brain function. It affects your mood, every part of how you function. So like sex and your gut and skin and weight and everything.
Yeah,
it's different for everyone. And fibromyalgia is kind of known as like an older woman's disease, and that's why like even especially when like younger people are diagnosed with it, like it's hard for doctors to diagnose it because they don't want to believe that you have such a disease.
So bizarre.
Yeah. It's hard to even explain fibromyalgia. It's very mysterious. And there's also some overlap with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. Mm-hmm. Some doctors say they're the same thing. Some doctors say that they're different. My doctor told me I had both, which is very common. Wow. There's a documentary called Unrest about chronic fatigue syndrome on Netflix. And it made me cry because it was exactly my experience. Like, this lady had it way more severe. Like, if she goes to, like, a festival outside, she'll have a flare-up and be crying and screaming and throwing up later. Oh. That's pretty extreme. I have had flare-ups after concerts, which sucks because I love dancing. But yeah, fibromyalgia...
it's one of the more mysterious ones. And it affects you with just being, like, it helps... doesn't help, but it goes along with you being tired, so you're in pain.
Yeah, and it also, like, it's kind of like narcolepsy's, like, friend. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people with narcolepsy have fibromyalgia, and other way around, too. They often come together just because they mess with your neurology.
Two things that doctors have a really hard time with, I think, in general.
One thing that I want to say is I didn't know what fibromyalgia was. So, okay, the time between my narcolepsy diagnosis and my fibromyalgia was it was only like a couple months. Like, I finally got the narcolepsy diagnosis.
In your 20s.
Yeah, I was 23. And that's when the neurologists were like, oh yeah, you're severe insomniac atypical narcolepsy. And they called it atypical just because I don't have the sleep attacks. But they were like, here's stimulants to keep you awake.
Yeah, to keep you awake.
And I was like, but I can't fall asleep. And he said, no, yeah, but this will keep you awake. And like, but shouldn't we get me sleeping? And they were like, here, no, you got to take these. And I tried, and it was awful. I lost more weight because stimulants I'm like, I already
They're
throw
stimulants,
up.
yeah.
They made me throw up more. I couldn't function. So that's what led me. Yeah, that's what led me to cannabis. What was the question?
Yeah, I don't remember. Oh, we were talking about that. You were saying narcolepsy. One thing you wanted to mention.
Okay, yeah. This is what happened. So when I finally started having the intense body pains and went to my doctor about it, she looked at me and she was like, "That sounds like fibromyalgia." And I said, "Oh, my aunt has that." I didn't really know what it was. She looked at me and she hugged me and she said, "I really hope you don't have fibromyalgia. I would rather have cancer."
Oh my gosh.
That's what she said to me when I was 24 because my birthday had just passed. I was just dealing with now knowing that I had ulcerative colitis and narcolepsy, and she said that to me. And then shortly after we did the tests, they do all the blood work and rheumatology and all that. So
that's how you figured it out, is through blood tests and.
Yeah, they do that just to rule out like lupus because my mom has lupus.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of autoimmunes and things like that. They all kind of tie into one another.
All these things that nobody teaches you about when you're in school at all. So if you're having any of these symptoms, I think it's so hard for children to ever get diagnosed unless they have a parent who's like batting for them after doctor with doctor.
Absolutely. I thought, and I didn't realize this until I got so sick, is growing up sick, I thought everyone else feels the same way I do. Their bodies hurt after activity, but I'm just a pussy and I can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that this was just how it felt having a human body.
Yeah.
How would you know? That was the only experience I had.
And you're like, how are these people able to do all of this stuff and I can't?
On my book reports, my doctors wrote report cards. She was like, "You doesn't like doing PE." I didn't like doing PE because it's so much painful and I was so tired after. Yeah. And I would get huge bruises and I had bronchitis on top of everything else. Yeah. I would have a really bad bronchitis flare up like twice a year. Sometimes it would turn into pneumonia.
Did you have asthma?
Yeah. Okay. And now I have asthma as an adult. Not that bad, thankfully. I'm not on an inhaler anymore. I hate inhalers.
Yeah.
They're stimulants.
Yeah.
And then your other large illness was colitis? Did I say that right?
Ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, so ulcerative colitis. So that's inflammation of the colon with bleeding ulcers. Mm-hmm. And it has remissions. So I'm in like a mostly remission right now, which is, it's nice. But nice. Even in remissions, there's like blood.
And is that just something that you can be born with? Is something because of a certain diet and your body can't handle it? Or is that just...
Yeah, well, it runs in my family.
Okay.
Colon cancer runs in my family. Lovely. So a lot of my aunts, I lost like 2 aunts to colon cancer, and it started with ulcerative colitis. Oh, man. So I've had 4 or 5 colonoscopies in my life because they want to check you every 2 years when you have colitis. Yeah. I'm overdue, but I just can't.
They're so awful.
You have to drink a giant tub of laxatives.
I had to do it one time because I was really sick in high school. Guys, usually when you get colonoscopies, what they do is they make you poop your guts out the night before, and then they stick you under. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky, you'll stay under. I woke up during mine, and then they put a thing up your butt and go into your colon and take a little video camera of it, little show.
It's supposed to be mandatory for men once they hit 40.
So,
for prostate cancer.
Much older thing to do.
Mm-hmm. But when you go through it in your teens, in your 20s,
it sucks.
It sucks, just like almost every other medical procedure. But So in going through all of these, would you say that the depression that you had was amplified afterwards, or was it better to know?
It was absolutely amplified. Like, it was great knowing, like, having a name for these illnesses and being like, wow, I'm not crazy. Like, I have been in pain all this time. That didn't make it easier for people to believe me, but it was nice for me to know. But the depression got worse because I already had this like lifetime of like a shame identity around me from like being bullied and like just always like molded into a person that I wasn't because I was so ashamed to be who I really was. Yeah. And so getting sick it felt like, God had like a magnifying glass over me and was like, yeah, now you're sick and now you really can't do what you want to do. So it felt like I was being kicked while I was already down. So I felt like shit. I was like, wow, I'm a piece of shit. I'm a loser. And now I'm sick. So like my life is over. When I was 24, I thought my life was over. And I was like, I think the suicidal episodes I had after those diagnoses was like, I had like 6 of them from age 24 to 27.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, it was like I was rolling and I couldn't stop.
I'm so sorry.
It was rough. And I couldn't get my family to understand how bad it really was. Because it's like if I tried to tell them, they would feel like I was trying to guilt trip them and be like, I'm depressed and I have a shitty life. And they're like, but look at all we've given you.
The things that you have.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's
depression
not about
is hard
that.
for people to understand.
Yeah. Especially when it's kind of based on that. Look at all the things you have. Look at how good stuff is. Like, this world is so worth living in. How could you feel that way? It's like, no.
People have it worse than you.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's people, I think it's just, there wasn't enough knowledge in it. And you were dealing with so much.
Especially with invisible, quote-unquote, illnesses.
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect of it. Like, I don't look sick. When I'm having a flare-up, if you know me well, you know that I don't feel well.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, I look like a normal person, and especially if I'm having a flare-up and I lose a lot of weight, I get all these comments, oh, you look so great, have you been working out? And I don't know how to tell people, no, I've actually been throwing up every night and bleeding from my butt.
Yeah.
And wearing diapers to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like, people can't handle that. Most people don't have it in their emotional wheelhouse to know how to deal with hard emotions, let alone all of the sicknesses.
And that's why I lost a lot of friends. And it's not really that they were bad, selfish people. It's just that they didn't know how to be there for me.
Yeah.
No.
They did not know. They've never been in a situation like that. Because when your friend breaks their arm, it's like, oh no, feel better soon. And you sign the cast. And it's a whole ceremony and you know it's going to be over in 6 weeks and they're going to be back to normal. But when you have something that is permanent, there's no cure, you're never going to get better, you're always going to be in and out of flare-ups, they don't know how to be there for you. Because it's awkward. It's awkward to be like, hey, I know you're in pain and it's going to be the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that
makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And I totally get it, you know? At first, I was really mad about it. I was very angry in the beginning of all getting diagnosed. I felt like, fuck my friends. You know, I've known this girl since first grade and she's not there for me. And I was there for her. And I felt that was just the hurt that I was feeling. And now I'm, you know, it's like, why am I going to be mad about them for, you know?
They just couldn't handle it. And it wasn't because they didn't love you.
Yeah, and I had to learn how to be there for myself, which was a really big one.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to talk about is, so how, like, what did you do to take care of yourself? After you found out your diagnosis and everything, and what happened then?
A lot of research. So, I didn't, you know, the doctors were so useless. They were just like, blood test after blood test. Oh, you're perfectly healthy. It's like, but you diagnosed me with all these things. Obviously, I'm not healthy, and it's even hard for doctors who study this stuff to understand how it impacts your life. And so, in the research, I had to just try different things and try different. I would ask my doctor about different medications. I would try different herbal supplements, yoga, meditation, everything I could find I would try that was safe and that I could access. And I spent thousands of dollars on like alternative treatments just to see what would work. And some of it didn't work, some of it worked great. And that was, you know, the self-care medical side of being there for myself. But it came to the point where I had to be like, it's like, you know, if I'm gonna go through this forever, I have to have some kind of like system. So I made like a self-care routine for managing daily pain that I still do every day with like a bath and like self-massage and that kind of stuff. But the emotional part of it is hard because you have to allow yourself the room to be mad about it. Like I get, like, if my spine is flaring up, that's another thing we haven't talked about, my spine. If I have we'll talk about it. I have a spinal thing. And when my spine is flaring up, that pain makes me crazy. It's the worst. It feels like a demon is like gripping the back of my head and I'm like, my nerves are on fire. It feels like my brain is in a boiling pot. Like it's very uncomfortable. And my teeth hurt like they're going to explode. And that's the pain that makes me feel hopeless. And I feel like I get into a shit mood immediately. I get really depressed, and I'm like, wow, like, I guess I really am done for. And I start having those kinds of thoughts.
A negative spiral.
Yeah. So you have to have, like, build the awareness to recognize when you're having those thoughts and just observe them. Like, take that step back and be like, okay, our brain is like a ticker tape. It's just always, like, saying shit. Mm-hmm. And we can't predict our next thought. We're just observing them. So taking that step back and, you know, sitting myself down on the couch and being like, why do you think your life is over? Why do you think you're a piece of shit? Because it's like every day anyway, even if I'm not in a flare-up, I open my eyes in the morning and it's like, you're a loser. It's like Venom. Mm. But I think if I actually had a alien parasite up my butt, I would be happy about it. But like having the depression and the you're a loser and like that kind of stuff every day, you have to just treat it like a shitty roommate. Because you wouldn't talk that way to your friend. Yeah. Right? But we talk that way to ourselves all the time.
Yeah, we're big here on how you're holding up about talking well to yourself and being aware of what you're saying to yourself. And that whole idea of like, oh, your self-talk doesn't do anything is bogus.
Yep.
100%. You can stop your self-talk and you can switch it around. Yep.
Yeah, I named her Vanessa, so when she's real, when she's real mean, she'll be like, you're stupid, you're never gonna, and I'm like, okay, Vanessa,
See ya.
Yeah, finish your latte, just, you know, I just give her space to be negative and be a bitch, and then sometimes you just have to laugh at yourself and be like, wow, I'm a fucking lunatic thinking these things, and that's another thing too, like when I have those like depressive episodes, like I look around my room at all my cool stuff and I feel like shit about it. I'm like, I don't deserve any of this.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, look at all these action figures and DVDs and blah, and I'm like, I feel so unworthy of everything that I have. So you have to take time to sit down with those thoughts too. Like, positivity isn't just like ignoring those thoughts and ooh, I'm gonna be happy anyway. It's, you have to give it the space to be negative, but analyze it, think about it. Journaling helps. And
moving forward with it.
Yeah, and like step around it a little bit like it's a piece of shit on the floor.
So one thing that a lot of people deal with invisible illnesses is just when the professionals fail you. And I know that was a big case with, I think also you were talking about your spine.
My spine is a really big one. It's kind of been like this ghost that has haunted me since I was little. I've always had back pain and just pain in general. And it's I was like, where do I even start with this one? Because so basically, when I finally got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I noticed that my main pain point, like my center of my pain, was in my cervical spine. It's like the top of your spine where your neck is. And it was so intense. And I kept talking to the doctors about it. And they would poke my shoulders and be like, yeah, you're pretty tense. Here's muscle relaxants. And they would send me to get MRIs and x-rays. And they'd be like, you look fine. You just have a muscle spasm. Your neck's fine. And I would take my x-rays and my MRIs to a chiropractor that I started seeing, an alternative one. And he was just like, your neck's the wrong shape. Like, how did they miss this?
Oh my gosh.
And I always knew that there was something about my spine that no one was picking up on. Because I would get like this swollen hump, like a bump on the bottom of my cervical spine. And I had a flare-up, and it would make all my other illnesses way worse. So I was like, what is it about my spine? So I kept trying to research, and I wasn't quite putting in the right keywords, I guess. But like for years, the doctors were just like, yeah, your spine's pretty swollen. Here's, the muscle relaxants. But they also put me on like 4 different kinds of antidepressants because of my spine.
They treat your symptoms, not the root of the problem.
Yeah. They're like, you're depressed because you're in pain. And I'm like, yeah, but
also,
can we handle the pain? Yeah. And it took 4 years for the doctors. It took 4 years of the doctors watching me deteriorate to finally give me pain pills, which I don't really like taking. I have them for emergencies, and my handicap parking placard. That's been a huge thing. But I didn't finish about the spine. So back to the spine, basically.
And doctors failing.
Yeah, doctors failing. So the spine thing, doctors don't really believe in spinal stuff causing illnesses. They think it's like witchcraft, like chiropractor kind of stuff. So finally, when I was 27, I saw an alternative chiropractor, and we did x-rays, we did everything, and we confirmed that I grew up with a condition called atlas subluxation complex. Technically, it's atlantoaxial for me. So it's the first two bones in your spine, your atlas and your axis, and they're special. They're made just for each other, and your brainstem goes through them. I grew up with them subluxated, misaligned in a way that compressed my brainstem progressively as I got older. So that contributed to me having motor skill issues. I had trouble writing. I still have trouble writing. I couldn't tie my shoes until I was 10 years old. Very clumsy, always falling down at school, always bumping my head and stuff. And that spinal condition is linked with fibromyalgia, narcolepsy, colitis, everything, because it messes up your body.
Everything's connected.
Yeah. And it's like chicken or the egg. Was I born with these illnesses in my DNA, or did the spinal thing cause them? Yeah. So we don't really know, but like, because my mom has chronic illness, it could be a lot of it's in my DNA, and the colitis, obviously.
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, but I got my atlas adjusted 2 years ago, and I've been on a healing journey, and my body is changing every day from it still. Because once you get that pressure off of your brainstem, your body can start to like
slowly heal.
It can readjust and heal. And a lot of it has been like the scarring in my connective tissue, because all of that was the wrong shape for my whole life. And it's like crystallized almost. It was crunchy from like the
force of being in one position.
Yeah, like the fascia gets like sticky and it crystallizes because your body's trying to protect you from it.
Right.
So massage has been a huge thing for breaking down all that crunchy stuff. I used to have I used to be able to crunch like my flesh for people and go, I don't have much anymore. I was like a walking like cadaver up here, just no blood flow because it was so stuck. My acupuncturist helped me a lot with that. So,
so the emotions that come with with professionals, doctors not believing you, I mean, you must have a lot of anger and resentment maybe towards that, because it would have taken like if they had figured it out earlier.
Yeah, when I first got the atlas subluxation diagnosed, I was so angry I wanted to sue every doctor I'd ever seen. I was just like, this is the simplest, tiniest little thing. All it is making sure our brain is plugged into our body. That's all that is. And That's a
good way of putting it. Like your plug was kind of a little loose and off to the side, like when you put it in wrong.
That's exactly what it is. And doctors, it's not, I asked the alternative chiropractor that helped me, I was like, why don't doctors see this? And she's like, they go to school for 12 years. They see this problem, this medication. It's not in their toolbox. And this doctor, she saw people every day who grew up with the same thing. Some of them didn't have it quite as long as me. Some people they get it in a car wreck, and then 5 years later they have fibromyalgia. So every day this woman is adjusting people's atlases.
That must be frustrating for her.
Yeah. She gets mad, but she's like, it's my job to set them on
to heal,
path of healing. And, the difference that I feel in my body is crazy. But like doctors, it got to the point where I would get so angry at the doctors that every appointment that I had, I would leave crying. I would leave suicidal sometimes because they wouldn't believe me. They wouldn't do anything. They would just go, but you're perfect health. You look great. Yeah. You're doing great. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm barely coping. The pain is incredible. I'm isolated. I'm stuck at home. I can barely walk to the bathroom without like wheezing because I was so like depleted, just out of energy. And I started writing like pages of notes for my doctors each visit, and I would make them listen to me. I would be like, I'm coming in for this reason. It's been 4 years. My spine is swollen. I'm bleeding from my colon. And because they would try to like shush me and oh no.
Don't let the doctors shut you down. No. That's a big thing, I think.
I remember when you were walking around with just like this huge packet of just like all of your medical stuff, all in just like, here's my entire case study, thunk.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think the thing is that so many people believe that doctors, I mean, they're supposed to be the smartest people in our society. A lot of people talk like that, right?
But they're people.
They're people, and science also isn't perfect. And we're still learning as a society, and science is still growing, and we're still learning so much about the human body. I mean, look at the journey that science has had with depression. You know, you guys. So there's been so many times where I just didn't want to go to the doctor because I was embarrassed. Because I was embarrassed that they were going to shame me, and doctors sometimes do. They shame you and they try to shut you down and they act like they know what's best, and it can be so frustrating and so painful. So what is some wisdom for somebody who's maybe dealing with this and they're depressed and they're isolated and they're having these different physical issues? What would your wisdom be for them?
Even though it's something that we have to deal with forever, it doesn't mean that you can't live a fulfilling life at your own pace. It's hard because we feel like, I felt like my whole 20s was like me stuck in bed, being sick in a neck brace, throwing up into a bucket, shitting my brains out. And my friends were like going to Vegas and dating and having all these experiences. But there came a point where I had to realize this is my experience. And it's special, and it taught me a lot, even though it was really hard. I learned more being sick than I would have if I had just been like a normal, healthy person. Yeah. I know so much now about the human body, about medicine, about life, and I'm really grateful for the experience. And I know that that's not always an easy place to be, like especially if you're in a flare-up and it's like you're constantly running on fumes. But if you can figure out a way to have like a system for yourself, like I do, like a routine for managing your pain and scheduled rest breaks and, you know, the right medication and stuff, it's almost like, you know, preparing for a storm. So each flare up, or even if it's just like a depression relapse that doesn't come with a painful flare up, it can be really hard to deal with. So if you make sure you got your box ready for when that happens, you just have to kind of hold on and it'll pass. That flare up will pass. You'll feel a little bit better. You can pick yourself back up. And I've had to be okay with being slower than other people at getting stuff done and just being slower in general.
I think something I've learned from you also, just from hearing your journey, and is just because you get one or two opinions from a doctor doesn't mean they're right, and to sometimes seek out alternative medicine. And alternative medicine in the States isn't so alternative sometimes. Like, when we're talking alternative medicine, we're not talking about somebody who comes in and has sage smoke all around you and talks about auras. I mean, this is like stuff that should be pretty realistic, like chiropractic and, you know. So that's something to keep in mind, guys. If you're not getting the help that you need, looking into other alternative ways to get help.
Yeah, there's never anything wrong, especially if you are going the more... not necessarily natural, but definitely some of the alternative therapies out there. It is always good to look into them at the very least, because there's just giving things a try.
Yeah, YouTube is such a great resource now. Yeah. I mean, we have so much connectedness online with blogs, subreddits, YouTube, and that's also a good place to find support, I imagine. Like finding, that must be a good step if you're feeling isolated. There are, I'm sure, lots of places to find. Do you know of any that you would recommend of people who have chronic illnesses and you can talk?
Well, on YouTube, what helped me a lot in the beginning was just hearing other people's experiences. So I would like look up narcolepsy videos, and people had lots of videos,
so feeling so alone and seeing their experience and journey.
And when I first got the spinal thing figured out, listening to people's vlogs about their, you know, journey with their atlas subluxation was like opening up a whole new world for me, because I didn't know anything about that kind of illness or that kind of condition. But there are tons of communities online that will support you and be there for you and understand what you're going through. And yeah, I mean, integrative medicine is a thing. So if you can find a doctor who is open to that kind of stuff, that can be really helpful. Because like a big turning point for me, like I don't have a doctor right now, still dealing with insurance stuff. But when I finally got a new doctor, I was so, you know, prepared with my notes to like sit down with the rheumatologist and like explain to her everything. And she came in and she had notes on me. She had already studied my case. That's how it should be. So if you need to put your foot down with doctors, do that and do your own
it.
research, because the power is in your hands to learn about your illnesses too. Like, it's not just, you don't have to just listen to what the doctors tell you about it, because a lot of the time they're just going off what they learned.
Textbook.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, it does kind of come down to, if you do get an opinion from a doctor that you do not like, you are always, always, always capable of getting a second, a third, fourth, fifth, sixth opinions.
Yeah.
It's one thing if all of the doctors are saying one thing. It's another thing if you go through an tireless list of doctors and they all say the same thing.
Yeah.
That's two completely different stories there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a really good moral of the story is, whether it's your depression or a sickness, having prepared yourself for a flare-up with your depression or sickness, it's so important, is self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Being aware of yourself and doing the research. Because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to know your limits too. Like, I sometimes, I struggle because you feel like an asshole, like canceling on friends and stuff. But like, I have to know when things are going to happen so I can plan my rest breaks, or so I can say, you know what, I'm completely out of spoons, and I'm going to end up throwing up when I get home if I don't take this day off.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to know your boundaries, and it's okay to set them. It's okay to be like, I can't go to your party tonight, Jessica, I'm sick. Even if they don't understand, then Jessica,
it's not your job.
Yeah, Jessica might not be a good friend if she's not like cool about it.
Yeah, Jessica.
Damn.
Well, Nu, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me
and sharing your story.
Do you want to plug anything in the meantime?
Yeah, so you can find me online. My name is New Hologram. I am on YouTube. I am on Tumblr and Instagram, everything basically. New Hologram is my name. I post videos about chronic illness. I have a lot of them already up. And on Instagram and stuff, I talk a lot just about, my experience, and that's a good place to chat. And yeah, a lot of my followers are Spoonies too, so we all love sharing our stories.
That's fantastic. We'll put little links.
Yep, all links will be in the show notes, of course, as always. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at HAYHU Podcast, like our Facebook page, subscribe to the subreddit, and if you want to send us something directly, go ahead and email mailbag@howareyoholdingup.com.
Thank you guys for listening, and as always,
don't tell us to just get over it.